Psychological health and safety done well can minimize or eliminate several other issues that could require assistance from either a human resource professional or an attorney. However, too often these conversations occur after laws or policies are broken, as opposed to before harm is done or laws are broken. We'll talk with a labor and employment attorney who's also served as a human resource executive. Up next on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each episode, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk Psych Health and Safety. Welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, the research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. Too often, when HR professionals are consulted about workers' mental and emotional health, it's because there's been a problem. Something's occurred, and the worker's having some sort of mental or emotional issue that the people leaders are unable to address. Attorneys are often consulted when sometimes those same employees are threatening to file some sort of legal action, or the employer has taken action against the employee that the worker doesn't feel is in that worker's interest. So in this episode, we're going to talk to someone who's seen and heard a lot of these situations from both perspectives, from the perspective of the organization and the perspective of the worker, as a HR professional and as an attorney, and works today to try to help both individuals and organizations not get in trouble in the first place. So I want to say this because I haven't often had attorneys on, but I just want to share that my guest is, again, both a HR professional and an attorney. But please, folks, let's not try to take anything that we talk about today as a substitute for situational human resource advice or legal advice from a qualified HR professional or licensed attorney. Thought I'd put that out there first. So let's get into the introduction from our guest with this question. Who is Sandra Jean?
Hi, well, thank you for that warm introduction, Dr. D. You said it succinctly. I'm a labor and employment attorney and an HR professional. I started my career in 1997 when I graduated law school. I was a federal prosecutor with the Labor Board, and then I was recruited to go in-house in healthcare. And I've been an in-house attorney since 2008. And my titles have changed over time, overseeing either just labor relations or employee relations, labor and employee relations, and HR, because HR is such a litigated area for companies with the employees, and people are messy, so the people side of the business is
Right.
a big part of litigation. And so they're like, let's just put HR under Sandra. And so I've been an HR professional as well, at least since I've been in-house.
Sure. So yeah, lots of conversation to have in that area, because I some years ago figured out that the two things that get leaders in trouble is how they handle money and how they handle people, and they tend to do better handling the money, to be quite honest.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because to your point, they will bring someone in who's an expert to manage the money side because it's palpable.
right,
People are always often
right,
seen as disposable. That's why I was so
right.
excited when you invited me and when I heard about the kind of work that you do. The psychological safety of people at work is not something that
Right.
is considered. OSHA looks into physical safety, right? The trips, the
Right.
slips.
Right.
And again, those can lead to monetary penalties for companies. But nobody's really spent a lot of time looking at the psychological safety of workers. And I'm excited
Right.
to talk to you about that topic.
Sure. Well. Let's start there. If from either of your hats, either as an attorney, as an HR professional, or just as a human being, when you
Mhm.
hear psychological health and safety, what does that cause you to think about?
It's to me, it's simple, really. It sounds complicated, but it's simple. If you treat your employees the way you want to be treated, you normally would instill and maintain a culture where people feel safe to come to work. And what does that look like,
Right.
right? Well, we have a plethora, a slew of regulations that address the physical safety of employees. But the HR
Right.
team, especially, I always tell my team from an HR point of view, our job is to remove obstacles for employees so that they can focus on the task at hand. And what are those
Right.
obstacles? Yeah, some of them are benefits, make sure their pay is correct. But others are to make sure they feel like they can come into a workplace where they're free to bring their authentic self, meaning that they come,
Right.
they
Right.
understand the work to be done, they feel like they're supported. That doesn't mean they're going to do everything perfectly, but
Right.
there's room for
Sure.
error as long as they're trying, they're giving their best, and they have an opportunity to grow and understand how what they do contribute to the overall picture and
Okay.
also the bottom line. I think that's what most people are looking for.
Sure. Sure. So I'm going to deduce, and many people may have deduced, though you live in Atlanta, uh, that your Southern drawl isn't really like everybody else's. So how tell us a little bit more about how your where you come from. I mean, in terms of your upbringing, and how that experience gets you into the law. So if you can connect the two of those, because I think they're important.
Yeah. That's a excellent question, Dr. D, because I am the first generation immigrant, and even though I was born, I guess second generation. My parents came here. I was born in New York, but my mom took my sister and me back to Haiti. So I grew up in
Mm.
Haiti until I was 15, and then came back to the U.S., New York. And what I've observed, especially in healthcare, so when I went in healthcare, a lot of the CNAs, the entry level positions or unskilled positions are held by immigrants primarily, whether they're Spanish, Africans, Caribbean, and also Haitians. So those are the low paying jobs. Those are the people
Mm.
that come from countries where you don't have laws. Most of them have dictatorships. So they're not advocates for themselves. The unions play a big role in those settings because they feel like they have an advocate. They feel like they have an ally when there's a union in the workforce. And me coming from the labor board and having prosecuted both unions and companies, we were an equal opportunity prosecution agency because we wanted to make sure the act is what was being upheld, the National Labor Relations Act. So having seen unions and employers, and I must say they're both institutions and they're only as good as the people leading them. And that's one of the reasons I wanted and I was excited to go into labor and employee relations because my job was to make sure the employees felt that they were taken care of. And that
Mm.
looks a little different. My company sent me all over the place. I started out in Massachusetts. I was asked to go to PA. I've been to Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. I live in Georgia now, Minnesota, the Twin Cities. You name it, they sent me because as the CEO said when he wanted to meet with me at one opportunity, he complimented me on the results. I have that ability to relate to people because I genuinely care. I'm
Right.
able to put
Right.
myself in their shoes and I'm able to see myself in and all people want is to matter, to be seen.
Right.
I always say
Right.
to leaders, people are not afraid of bad news. They want news. They want to know that they matter, that you consider them in decisions that you're making. And that's how people become safe. Like I say,
Mm.
the physical safety is important, but people feel safe when they feel like leaders care about them as a person.
Right. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. In that conversation about safety specifically, I find that people tend to be on either side. They seem that it's a binary choice between the interest of the company or the
Mm-hmm.
organization. Because I've done a lot of private or public sector stuff, and so not all organizations are companies. They're not all there for profit. But if they're using the effort of other human beings, I think that people tend to take a side. It's all
Yeah.
about the organization or it's all about the people. And the thing that really, and getting to know you, is to see the ability you have to have balance. I mean, it's sometimes it is the organization, but sometimes it's the people. And sometimes it's both. And so,
Yeah.
how does I mean, let's dig into that a little bit more. How are you able to kind of do both?
I think it's because my and thank you for saying that because it's refreshing to hear that. I've heard it, but sometimes I don't. So it's good that you were able to see it. Before I went to law school, I was an accountant. So I grew up in the corporate world and I understand the financial decisions because one thing I tell employees, and I'll tell you, I don't care if it's a housekeeper, a janitor, if you talk to people and you make sense, they tend to meet you where you are. So I've
Okay.
talked to janitors, I've talked to entry level and mid level management. And when you explain to them the company's financial status, when they understand that, look, it's not that we don't want to pay you $30 an hour for an entry level position, but we do have other expenses. And most
Right.
importantly, it's not about whether we're making money today. It's about you have to save money for the rainy days as well. So
Mm,
the company has a budget that it must live within. Um, and they have some decisions they have to make. If it's a public company, that means they have shareholders. These people made investments in the company, and I bring it to their level, just like you. If you made an investment, you want to see a return on your investment. Therefore, the investors want to see. So the people leading the company have a fiduciary duty to
right.
manage the business in a way where you feel like you're taken care of and they're taking care of the people that invested in the vision. That's why we have the company so that you can come to work. Now, I take it a step further and I often challenge unions with this because unions will come to the table. I negotiate. I represent unions. Lately, back in the day, I only represented management, but I had the opportunity to sit next to you and represent a union. But unions usually come to the table and they just want money. Most of the time, it's
Mm,
all about give
mm,
me more money,
mm.
give me more money. I know you got the money, give me the money. And I said, look,
Right.
the money is, we can meet somewhere, right? There's always money. I think you're the one that coined the phrase for me anyway. I don't know if you got it somewhere. That money is only, or price, money is only an issue in the absence of value, right? If you value
Right.
your
Right.
employees, you're going to make sure they're paid competitively. But I always challenge the employees to say, look, a company has to make business decisions. Why would they pay you in an entry level position what they would pay someone who's skilled? So if you want to
Mm,
make more money, you also have a duty to invest in yourself. If you bring
yes.
an additional skill set to the table, now you have a negotiating pawn or something to say, look, not only I was entry level, I appreciate when you paid me $18 an hour, but look, I went and invested in myself. I'm worth
Right.
more now. I want $25 an hour. Now the company has a
Right.
reason to say, this person is bringing added value and we
Right.
want to pay more. Where it's frustrating is where people feel like just by being there, they need to make more money.
Right.
And
Right.
unfortunately,
Right.
the world doesn't operate that way. So in
It
in
doesn't.
being safe at work, in continuing to make sure that you matter at work, you have to always ask yourself, what skill set can I bring? How do I invest in
Right.
myself to make sure that
Right.
I can sit at the table, across the table from my employer and say, I deserve more money because look, I'm bringing added value. And that's for
Right.
everybody, even me as
Right.
an attorney, you as a doctor.
Right.
We continuously
Right.
have to
Right.
add to our skill set so that we can stay relevant.
Right.
And it's something that I encourage everybody to do it. And it does make you feel more powerful, more
It does.
and yeah, at work and in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, I'm connecting something that you just said kind of in the moment, that investing in yourself is actually another safety strategy, because
It is.
the environment that I'm in, it may be, and again, when I talk about psychosocial hazards, it's what is perceived or experienced by that person. It doesn't mean
Hmm.
that inherently what they're doing is going to kill them or, destroy the world, but it doesn't work for them. And sometimes,
Right.
well, what's necessary is the investment in myself will help me get out of that environment into one that'll actually work for me. So I find it really challenging to hear people complain about their circumstances, but not be willing to, speak up for themselves. They won't say, and again,
Hmm.
as much as I get on this podcast and folks who listen to me know, I'm really tough on employers, because most of the responsibility is with the employer, but not all of the responsibility is with the employer, because employers don't read minds. They don't know when
Exactly.
I'm being stressed. If I don't tell them, if they don't see
Right.
something, they have no way of knowing that
Mhm.
this isn't working for me. And
Right.
I, when I, coach and consult with people, I talk to them about, look, we need to make sure that this organization knows that this is an issue before we start, kind of hammering them and trying to to put your other hat on to call the lawyers in. It's
Right.
not
Right.
fair to do that to people,
Yeah.
to simply get mad at them because they didn't understand. I have to advocate for myself and say, look, for me, this doesn't work. Can we work something out? Because the other thing I'll say is, I don't believe you should be working for anybody. You should be working with people. Your role might be different, but you
Hmm.
bring something to the table. The organization needs what you bring. Let's see if we can make that
Exactly.
match. Yeah, that's the
Exactly.
idea.
In
That's the
in
idea.
in
Yeah.
health, yeah. In healthcare, the CNAs always often see themselves as at being at the bottom, and all they provide the bedside care to the patients.
Right.
And so they
Right.
are really in the talking about rolling up your sleeves and getting your hand dirty. That's what they
Yes.
do. And I often
Right.
say to them, I'm an attorney and I can't do what they do. There's a role
That's
for
right.
me to play
That's right.
within the
That's right.
organization, but that role is
Right.
not more important than the role they play in the
Yes. It's just different.
organization. And
That's
I
right.
want
Absolutely.
exactly. And this is where I think I'm able to connect, because I'm able to speak to the employers, to management. And I've liked the fact that I've been in management because I can influence from within. I recently wrote a book on human resources, and this book came out of a lot of things that I spoke about over my time, the past, I don't know now, 18 years in-house and working with leaders, in that we have to take care of our employees. That, to your point,
Right.
Dr. D, the employer must take care of the employees when they're at work. But since
Right.
the pandemic, there's been this whole thing about taking care of the whole person, right? The
Yes.
wellness efforts have increased exponentially. Whereas before, people offered EAP, but it was kind of there. Now it's the whole concept of taking care of the whole person, making sure that they're well mentally, and that we provide this, resources for them so that they can operate and manage themselves outside of the tasks that they have to
Hmm.
perform
Hmm.
for their
Hmm.
employers. And so
Right.
this notion about taking care of the employee, making sure that their mind is right. Because if they're
Right.
distracted by what's happening in their personal life, then they tend not to bring their best self to work.
Right.
And you don't
Right.
get as much as you could. So when you're investing in your employees, you're really investing in the company, because you get more
Right.
from the employees.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, we talked before we get started, and these often go this way. We try to say in advance what we're going to talk about, and then we take these rabbit trails based on where the conversation goes. But I'm sitting here thinking about, again, and I just want to keep, applauding you for this balance in the conversation. Not It's not just about the company. It's also about the worker, but it's not just about the worker. It's also about the company. You can't have one without the other and be successful. So I guess there's two ways I think you may have gotten this. I think you may have gone to some great school, law school, who taught you a bunch of stuff, and that's probably important. But I think there also might be you come across as if this is a little bit more personal than that because of your experience, the things that you've. So is there? Because I think people would look and say, "Oh, she's a successful attorney. She's got her own company. She's an author. She's all this stuff. She doesn't know what I'm going through."
Yeah.
What would you say to
Yeah.
those folks?
I, I actually often get that. Oh, you're an attorney. You don't understand. My father is my inspiration. My father only got up to a grade education. He was about 9 years old. He's the youngest of like 10 kids. I can't even keep count. And he was like, we can't eat and I have to go to school. Like in his mind, that didn't make sense. So he stopped going to school and started hanging out with mechanics so he can learn the ins and
Hmm.
out of cars. He'll proudly tell you by the time he was 19, he had two cars in the countryside of Haiti, bringing people back and forth to the capital. Not cars, but mini buses that did transportation for vendors, like to go to the market and sell or whatever. Fast forward, he came to New York. He worked for Ford and put in enough years so he can get his retirement, and then went off on his own and started driving a cab. And I will tell you, the whole time I lived with my dad until I left, my father never called out. In New York, whether we
Hmm.
had a snowstorm, my father was out the house at 6 a.m., by 6 a.m., and didn't come home
Hmm.
before 10 p.m. because he used to come home
Wow.
just in time to hear it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? So he can watch the news.
Right.
And so
Wow.
I saw this man, and it kept me through college, through law school, and through even going to work with my daughters. I have two daughters. He never called out. And there was snow, there was, you name it. He was not a young man. He was not used to the weather. And when I see other people at work, so fast forward, I go to the workplace and I look at a lot of immigrants or even others that are working, it's not so different. They just want to go to a place
Hmm.
where they can go have peace. They want to come, they want to work, they want to forget about the problems at home and all the people calling them, asking them for money, whether it's from the Philippines or wherever. Every diaspora here, we call diaspora, have some family members calling you saying, hey, so and so's sick, send me some money. Um,
Yeah.
and I know it's probably the same for Black Americans and others, but I speak to again the immigrants because they're the ones that tend to be in those roles. They're the ones that
Right.
take these positions where nobody wants to be in because they don't pay enough money. You got to work 3 jobs and you got to have 7 families. Yes, there were 10 of us living in a 1 bedroom apartment. Okay. I had
Hmm.
cousins, my brothers, my dad,
Really?
my um, we had people sleeping in the bathtub. But because that's how you can pay for the bills. You got to make
Right.
enough money for
Right.
everybody to survive. But in any event, we were fine. We grew up. We're all successful, doing our thing. But for some reason, I stay committed and connected to that cause, to that flight. Coming from
Hmm.
that, I know people just want to come home and do their job. So I do
Right.
twofold. I make sure that we stay connected. My job is to always work with management to instill and sustain a culture where people are at the center of what we do. I will say I've been fortunate because as an attorney, I bring more than the lay average, the lay HR person because I know the law. I've prosecuted. I know even in the book that I wrote, there's a whole section in the back about the law that impacts the workplace. Um, and I'm able to influence. And I love
Yeah.
that because I don't have to be adversarial. I can be at the
Right.
table when we're coming up with strategies and initiatives. And I'm the little voice that say, okay, let's talk about the people side of these decisions and those strategies. How do we communicate? How do we get the buy-in? How do we make sure they understand their roles in what we are trying to do? And it's so much easier when you can get your people on board, and be able to move, and it just flows better.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
Right. Yeah, it does. But I still find it. It's not surprising, but I find it interesting that, when we put on the hat that you sometimes have to wear, somebody calls you and says, I call you Your Honor because I think every excellent attorney has the potential of being a judge someday, and I want to get in practice. But so they're calling and going like, "Hey, I'm in trouble. I've got a business. We made good money last year, but now I've got tax liability. I've got I've got workers who are getting ready to sue me. I've got all this stuff, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I just wonder, why is it that folks don't think about this on the front end? Why? So what are some of the reasons you're finding that people don't do this stuff on the front end and they wait till after there's a problem?
Some of it is lack of awareness. They don't know what they don't know. I see, for the most part, a lot of businesses get in trouble at the 5 to 6 year mark, because when they're getting started, they bring in their friends, they bring in their family. They don't necessarily document the role of each person or the contribution of each person. It's all a big hodgepodge. And look, everybody want to support you, right? Companies tend to make money steadily around the 5-year mark, because the first year you're kind of figuring it out. The second year you might make some money. The third year you don't know what happened, because you're like, what happened? I was making a lot of money year 2. But you're putting in systems, you're putting in processes, and you're building your pipeline of clients. So around year mark 4, 5 is when you steadily, your name's been out there. People know about you. You're making the money. It's steady. Now you're even scaling and growing. And people are like, where's my share of the, we're growing. I was there with you from day one. I deserve, 50%. Right. And you're like, no. You were an employee, because when we didn't make money, you still got paid. I'm the one that didn't eat. I'm the one that went to the neighbors and say, do you happen to go around dinner time just so they can invite me? and then people sue each other. And so I now go around and I do a lot of education around, guys. If you can't do it during the first few months, find a time early on to make sure that you have operating agreements. Georgia is one of those states that tend to be quite lax about whether you have an operating agreement or not. So, but that doesn't mean you don't need one. It protects you in so many ways. It delineates what each role, what's each contribution from the parties. What if you're an employee, then you're an employee. Your name is not listed in the operating agreement, and we don't have to go to court to figure that out, and to go through testimony and have a trial of fact, like a judge determine what the relationship is. You know why? Because it's in the contract, it's in the operating agreement. The other thing people don't do is they put things on the back burner. They They don't protect the company themselves. They don't delineate that, okay, this is the company. It's a separate entity versus me. I have a gentleman who called me. He's an immigrant, first year. He's been operating his business, never had an agreement, 15 years. He has people that work for him, but he claims they're independent contractors, as opposed to W-2, so no workers' comp, nothing. 15 years into the business, he's driving with one of his quote unquote employees slash independent contractor, and they get into a car accident. The employee, a friend, and that's his friend. He totally did not want the friend injured, but the friend was severely injured. He was on surgery number 3 within a few days of the accident because they needed to stabilize him, still in ICU. And of course, I get the call when they get a letter from an attorney. He received a letter from an attorney that said, we want a list of your assets because we're representing Mr. Smith, who was in a severe car accident with you as your employee. And we want to know what insurance you have, what asset. And that's when he's calling me. And I said, dear sir, it's too late. You've been put on notice that there's a lawsuit pending.
Right.
But, there are strategies business owners can take to protect themselves, because now his house was the biggest asset he had. And because the company was never really protected, they can come after his home. Now, he might have homestead there, that could give him some level of protection, but there's no insurance. He commingles because he's never really separated. A good attorney is going to attach everything. And so I go and I educate people about the contracts they need to have, the types of insurance they need to have. The other thing that people do is sign leases left and right. I'm like, oh my God, have someone review the lease, because there are a lot of one-sided leases out there that business owners are signing. And we have a lot of employees that went out now since the pandemic and opened their business. So they're not true entrepreneurs or true business owners. They're people that have skills, right? Or talents, or both, that went out there and said, I'm going to try to do this on my own. Because the pandemic showed a lot of people that maybe sometimes you only have yourself to rely on. And so they're out there not knowing what they don't know. And they just don't approach things from a legally sound perspective. And that's how they get themselves in trouble. Yeah.
Wow. So again, you're enlightening me again, because so one of the, if you were to look at the international standard and look at the list of psychosocial hazards, and this is what I bring up a lot because it's the first one on the list, it talks about role ambiguity. And even when I've described it before, I tend to describe it in terms of the role of the person. And listening to what you just said, it's also about the role of the company and the role of the relationship between the company and the person. And when those things are ambiguous, when they're not clear, then it does create a psychosocial hazard for the human being, because the organization is it doesn't have feelings. Companies don't have. I know people say that corporations are people, but no, they're not. Human beings have feelings. Human beings have, emotions, and that's who gets affected when these roles are not clear. When I don't know, am I an employee or am I a contractor? Am I full-time or am I part-time?
Yeah.
Am I hourly or exempt? All that kind of stuff that doesn't get laid out tends to only come up after there's some sort of conflict. And even that conflict, because we don't do a good job of training people on how to resolve conflict. So again, that's another reason they'll call you and say, hey, these two people aren't getting along. Yeah. Well, we never trained them to get along.
Right. Yeah. No, you bring up a good point, Dr. D, because, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, tell us more. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say you bring up a good point, because a lot of people tend to think of the employee as the only person that can suffer when there's ambiguity or chaos or lack of structure, whatever you want to call it. But in fact, both entities suffer. The employer suffers because now they're faced with unhappy employees, They are not as productive as they can be because they're not safe. Employees don't feel safe. They're not going to
Right,
bring their
right,
whole
right,
self.
right,
And the
right.
management team, they're people too, and they're employees. Sometimes people look at them as the employers, but they're really employees. And they're not
Yes.
safe because they want to be successful, but they don't know how to manage people. So when you show
Right.
each party how they can benefit, what do we call it? The WFM, what's in it for me? um, when I approach conversations using the WFM approach because people want to know at the end of the day what is in it for me. So whether I'm talking to the employer or the management team, I will identify them as employees that are the management team. If you know what they want, you're able to communicate with them on a
Right.
level where they can appreciate the message. Same thing with the employees when you're able to identify what they want, right? What's the only reason they show up here? Why are they here? People say it's the money. People don't show up day in, day out to take care of patients in a nursing home where I hate to be so crude, but they're defecating on themselves and doing things because of the money. They can go to Burger King or Walmart or some other place and make that same money and not have to deal with family members that are ungrateful, patients that are senile or demented that assault them on a day-to-day. They're there
Right.
because they
Right.
care. Those people tend to be pitchers.
Right.
They pour into others. And when they see that person, they might have some trigger, like a grandmother who raised them or somebody. That's the reason someone remains a CNA for 20 years. It's not because of the money. You couldn't pay them enough. So when you know
Right.
that, then you tailor your communication to their heart. Because you want them to understand you appreciate why they're here, and you want to make sure you give them. I'll tell you, there was a building I was supporting in Thomaston, Georgia. Okay. My first year, that building was crazy. They couldn't find people. We couldn't grow the business, not because the demand wasn't there, but because we couldn't find the right employees to come and work. Fast forward, I come to find out you got a lot of people that are promoted and put in positions of power that don't know how to relate to others. And that was the problem
Right.
there. So we made a change in the leadership because we didn't need someone with authority. We needed someone in a position of authority, but with compassion and empathy. So we brought in
Mm.
this lady, and she was a big goofball. I loved her. I still stay in touch with her. She was the leader. And we started talking to the employees. And do you know when we had extra bonus money and we're thinking, okay, do we give them the money? Or do we ask them how do they want to spend the money? And I remember the first time we did it, none of them wanted the money. You know what they wanted, Dr. D? They wanted shower caddies. They said when they were bringing the patients to get their showers in the bathroom, they had to carry everything. But it would be so much better if they had shower caddies to put there. So it goes to show you who benefited from that. The patients, there was less
Yeah.
waste of product for the company. And the
Right.
employees
Right.
felt like, okay, people listen to us because this is a pain
Right.
to carry. It wasn't anything. Yes, it was convenience for them, but the company ultimately benefited because there was
That's
less
right.
waste of products and it was more efficient to go in one trip with
Yes.
shower caddies. You put
Yes.
everything you need and then you take care of the patient and you bring them back. When you
Hmm.
speak to your employees, you're surprised how much you can learn and how much they're more aware about the business than you might think they are. And that's a lesson for every
Wow.
manager, supervisor, leader in a company.
Wow. That's something we don't get all that often. I mean, we don't get those kinds of examples of because it's probably because of the circles I find myself traveling in. I get lots
Mhm.
of the lived experience that's negative, and this is what didn't go right, and blah blah blah. But what you just described, paints a different picture because and again, I believe wholeheartedly that if we work with people and not, they don't work for you, they work
Right.
with you, and they
Exactly.
have a role to play. And if we pay attention to the role that they play, they know what's more efficient because they have to do it. And ultimately,
Exactly.
as you mentioned, if you listen to them and create an environment, often it really will cost you less, to be quite honest. It really will, because they're going to go for things that makes my job, it doesn't really help me to get a raise. And then I get more money, but I hurt myself, or I just don't feel good about it. There was a survey recently or some data that suggested that a toxic environment is 10.4 times more likely to cause a person to leave than what you pay them. So if you can detoxify the environment, again, as you suggested, is by listening to people. And you can't do everything, but there's a lot of things. They're not hard. They're not hard. They're not hard. And taking care of some of these small things will have great feedback, and it's a great investment, and you get a lot in return for just being kind to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Dr.
So
D, you hit it on the nail. Yeah.
Right. I wanted to make sure, as we, start to get, I wanted to make sure we had some time to talk about the book. So this is your first book? Is this your first time author? Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you could have also written a book on legal stuff. Why did you choose to write a book on HR?
Because in my career over the past 18 years as HR, leading the HR team, a big part of what I do is make sure that we're regulatory compliant and that we minimize risks for the company. Okay. And by that, the employees benefit as well, because if we're regulatory compliant, we're at least doing what we need to do to stay out of legal trouble. So we do a lot of auditing. We do a lot of policy, handbook updates, to make sure they reflect the current legal landscape. And we tweak, we put processes. But one of the other things that I loved and I always educate the HR team on is how do we take care of the employees from A to Z. And the employee is not taken care of when they start producing. It's from the time you're recruiting. How do you generate leads so that you can attract the right people? How do you turn those leads and turn them into applicants, and then take those applicants and turn them into candidates that now interview and you hire as employees? How do you stay connected and make the person feel part of the team through the onboarding, when they're filling out their I-9, the paperwork before they come for orientation? And then how do you, we hire people and we say, we want only the best, right? We want you to come and give us the best of what you have. But then they come to orientation, we put them in a closet where it's 100 degrees hot. And then we're like, oh, we treated you like crap, but we want you to give us the red carpet treatment. No, it doesn't work that way. It's a relationship. Okay. And you as the employer sets the tone. So this guide takes you from all of that. How do you do an effective orientation where people feel like, wow, I want to be part of this team? Because most turnover happen within the first 90 days. Very often employers don't realize, you might have interviewed me and hired me. When I start, it's my time to interview the workforce and interview the workplace and see if this is where I want to be. So most turnover happen within the first 90 days. So how do we maintain and cultivate a relationship or an environment where people want to stay? Right? We chose you. Now we want you to choose us type of deal. And then through the employee life cycle, all the way to, I have some case studies. So I've written this in my past lives. I've educated, and I said, why not put it in a book? Last year when I launched my company, I was sitting on this gold mine, and I said, everybody can have access to it. I joined a few HR groups, and I noticed everybody struggles with the same thing. They struggle with, how do we make the best impression? How do we feel our employees valued, make them feel valued? And I said, this book, A Practical Guide on Effective Workplace Management, would be useful to everybody. And that's why I wrote and published it, and it came out this past month in June.
Absolutely. And thankfully it is not 700 pages either.
No.
It is, it is readable in a day or two, depending on how fast you read.
It is.
And again, what I like about it is having my own copy. What I like about it, it's kind of written in a language that's not over most people's head. It's not, there's some technical terms because some of the stuff's kind of technical. But I think even in the way people write books, they write it to the 1 or 2% of people who get it, and then the rest of us who know just enough about it to be dangerous are lost. And and you end up that 700-page manual sits up on the shelf and it never gets used. And I think this is a really practical kind of approach. Some things you can actually use, and that really is the point. And I think it's really going to make a difference. I really do. Yeah.
Thank you.
And congratulations
Thank you
on
Yes, thank you,
Sure.
Dr. D. And I know you were there from the beginning, encouraging me. I love it. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, again, I think a part of the value we bring to the world is the opportunity to, see other people that are on the journey and encourage them because, I'm a believer that sometimes the most selfish thing I can do is to help somebody else. Because there's going to come a time when I'm going to need somebody. I can't do it for myself. I'm really good at certain things, and there's certain things I don't know anything about. So it's good to have people around who know something more about that. So as we start to conclude the conversation, two things I'd like to hear. One is something that we didn't talk about. You want to make sure that you share, with the group who are either watching or listening. And then the second thing is how folks can find you if they want to, they've heard a lot about, these different situations in the book and they want to get more information. So first is something we didn't talk about, a nugget that you want to leave with the folks who are watching or listening.
I'll say this. I always believe in the power of one. I know one person cannot do it all, but one person can take the initiative and others will come. I was able to start a Georgia Haitian American Chamber of Commerce with two other people. I had never done it. I was not even a business owner, but there was a need. I was part of a conversation and I was brave enough to say, okay, I'll join and help out. As an attorney, I can help put the paperwork together and with my accounting background. And now the chamber is 12 years old. So it's a great way to get connected with Haitian businesses in Georgia, and market to them or partner with them or whatever. The other thing is the Haitian American Lawyers Association of Georgia, which I co-founded 3 years ago. So that organization is somewhat younger. Wow. But again, I'm a visionary. When I see a need, I feel a need. I may not know what it's going to look like, but I'm the kind of person that I'll jump in first and figure it out later, kind of. So that's why I was able to create these, and with the good Lord by my side and great community support, these organizations are doing well and we're living our purpose. So I would say the power of one. If you're in a situation, to your point, Dr. D, where you say you love to help people, it takes all of us for us to win. And when I look at the decisions coming down from the Supreme Court, taking away women's rights, taking away minorities' rights, we cannot afford to be complacent. We need allies in the white people. We need minorities to band together. We need women to understand we're not against each other, because it's not good when you see rights being taken away. So I'll leave it at that. This is not a political show, but as an attorney and a community advocate, those are the things that drive me. Sometimes I'm too serious, but that's my purpose on this planet. The second thing I would say is for the book, it's on Amazon, and you see my name, Sandra Jean. It's written by me. It's under the category of human resources, personnel management. I was a bestseller on that day, and then I was number 3 overall. But I'm so happy because number 3, the number 1 was The 5 Dysfunction of a Team, which is a well-known book, which is everywhere. Right. And the second one was Who Moved My Cheese, which is again another big book on emotional intelligence that everybody knows, that have been used for years, decades, to do training. And my little book was number 3. So I was like, dang. So I'm on Amazon.
There we go.
And you can go on my website, sandraljean.com. Also under my name right here is to get in touch with me. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't think there are a lot of Sandra L. Jean, but you can look for Sandra L. Jean Esquire, ESQ, and my face should pop up. But that's it.
Right.
I'm so happy you had me here. I know we're running on an hour, if not more. I'm
Right.
excited about the topic. It's so needed, Dr. D, to have people
Right.
be intentional about the psychological safety of people. People are
Right.
shooting people at work is because they've had it. They
Right.
can't do it. And
Right.
in the gun culture
Right.
that we have, people are operating at a 12. We just have to, we have a
Right.
collective obligation to take care of each other.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for for spending some time with me, Sandra. It's it's another great conversation, and there'll
Mhm.
certainly be more.
Thank
So,
you.
for those of you who who are watching this episode on the Flourish DX YouTube page, please do like and subscribe and share. If you're watching or listening for the very first time, welcome. I hope you've heard something that'll get you to come back and either watch or listen again. You can find previous episodes of the podcast on Psych Health and Safety USA.com. So if you don't catch this great conversation the first time it comes out, don't worry. It'll be there for quite a while. Please do become a part of the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting to us on LinkedIn. It is my goal and attempt to create this movement of people, more people talking about psychological health and safety here in the United States. And slowly but surely, we're going to get there, and we're going to be helped by great people, Sandra, like you. So again, that's it. We're going to call it a wrap, and we'll see you next time on the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. D.
Tune in each Friday for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.